Right. Well, Catherine, I just want to say thank you for being with me today. I have just finished reading your book. I mean, just so exciting. I took away so many things, and we're definitely going to get there. We're going to talk about, being better humans, selling at a higher level. But before we start today, I just wanted to ask you, you're from Texas. So tell me, what do you love most about your home?
Great. So I actually am so delighted to be back in Texas. I was born in San Antonio, Texas, and went to college in Houston, have also lived in Austin. And then my husband was a college professor, and we moved around for his job for a number of years, and then had an opportunity to relocate back to Houston 4 years ago. And I love Houston. It is hot and it really is very trafficy because it's the fourth largest city in the United States. But the diversity of people and culture, restaurants, and um, just opportunities. It's such an interesting place. My boys were teenagers here. And so it's just such an interesting cosmopolitan place to be. We live right by downtown in a 3-story townhouse that we purchased. And so we gave up some charm and some yard in order to be inside the most inside of 3 loops, Allie. There's 3 loops in Houston because it's so huge. And so we're inside what's considered the inner loop, really prime area close to everything.
Oh, wow. And so how did you, I mean, just curious, how did you select your real estate agent? I'm sure our audience wants to know.
Yes, 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 yes. So that was actually an interesting story. We had a referral through through a national chain that came from a friend from out of town. So when we were moving, this friend heard and said, "May I make a referral for you?" Since we didn't already have somebody in Houston, we said sure. And so that came through that interbrokerage kind of referral that I think happens. And it went fine. It went fine. I've since made friends since I've lived here 4 years. I've since made friends of people that I would probably use next time if we were to buy something else, but they did a good job. The other funny story about our purchase 4 years ago in Houston is that we did everything online because my husband was here for several months before I moved with the kids, because I had to sell the house back there and do all the things before we moved. And so the day I saw the house live was the day that we moved in.
Wow.
I didn't actually see it. I let him purchase it and I signed the papers virtually and everything. So the day I saw it was the day that we moved in with the moving van. And the reason I could do that is because we'd been married over 20 years and bought and sold many houses together. So I knew that we were fine, but I felt like that really gave me this wife pat on the back, like, how crazy is that, that you could have a partnership where you could let the other person completely make such an important decision. But I was completely comfortable and he did a great job.
Wow. Well, and that's what a lot of our buyers are having to do in this market because, with the individuals leaving these large metro areas to more of the suburbs, a lot of people are having to turn to FaceTime or, whatever, just really having a lot of faith. And I commend you because that takes a lot of faith to make a large purchase like that, having never seen it. But
It was great. The other thing that was really funny is that actually, you know how real estate pictures will often make rooms look bigger, but in this case, the kitchen looks smaller. So when I walked up to the second floor and I saw the great room and the whole kitchen and everything, I said, my first thought was, "Oh, I can entertain here. This is way bigger than I was thinking it was going to be." So I was tickled and so happy that I had aired in that direction as opposed to the other way, because usually, people use the wide camera and then you come in and the room's not as big as you were expecting, but this was the opposite.
Oh yeah, it's all about marketing. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. And I love Texas. I actually used to live outside of Houston just for a year. I lasted for a
Okay.
year. I couldn't anymore. The humidity was too much. Um, but I did want to ask you, so, something that, kind of getting into, our topic for today, you've spent a lot of time working with sales teams and sales leadership over the years, in your latest book, you lean into something that I'm so glad is being talked about. And I feel like it needs more emphasis. And that's the concept that I can be a decent human being and also be a really great salesperson. And why I thought that just has to be overemphasized is because I think most people have a huge distaste for salespeople. And from your research, you found that sales has a really bad rap, which we kind of already sort of knew. But what was surprising to me was that even salespeople don't think highly of their profession. Can you tell me why is that?
Or why would they take the job if they really think that way, right?
Right?
Right. So I think I have two answers to this question. How did they get there, right? Or why do they think that way? I think that unfortunately, one of the reasons is because there still are many industries and many individuals in those many industries who do what I call show up and throw up. Sorry, no, that's gross, but they really are leading with talking about themselves or their products or services. It is very pitchy, right? Pitch, it's very pitchy. And they are not starting with being curious about their potential client and asking questions about the other person first. So unfortunately, that negative stereotype exists because there's still so much bad behavior out there. That is part of the problem, right?
Mm.
I think the other thing that is an issue for people is that we have this negative stereotype. While I do believe there's plenty of people who still perpetuate it, like I just said, I think we also, as individual sellers, we remember whatever negative experiences we've had, either as a buyer or a seller, and we like to ruminate on those things. So whether that is a survival mechanism, right, because we're wired to perceive threat, or if that is because there's something called positive negative asymmetry in psychology, where there's research that shows people disproportionately remember negative things over positive.
Oh.
Not just about sales, but about everything. All of those things grouped together put us into this smorgasbord of mess as to why we have sales professionals who feel conflicted about the work they're doing.
Wow. Wow, absolutely. And, I think the one thing I hear so often is, well, I don't want to be salesy. I don't want to be pushy. Because, yeah, absolutely. We've all had, I'll never forget, one of the most negative sales experiences I ever had was buying a used car when I lived in California. It was the most high pressure tactic. I mean, I think I left close to tears. And so, yeah, you as a salesperson are like, I dread the idea that I could ever be that kind of person. So absolutely, I agree with you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Mm-hmm.
guess, I mean, in real estate, we have this concept and, of living by this 80-20 rule. And it's not unique to real estate alone, but, it's based on the Pareto principle that 20% of our efforts, yield 80% of the results. And although as real estate agents, we're extremely clear about what our 20% is, I mean, we know what we need to be doing. You hit the nail on the head, regarding the fact that we love, and this was just in your book when I was reading it, you hit the nail on the head that we love to stay busy with these non-revenue generating activities, which you mentioned is this common problem for us, just salespeople in general, right? And again, coming back to this, you would think that this would be counterintuitive, because why would you be in sales if you hate selling? So if we dislike it, again, kind of, you kind of told us a little bit about why we dislike it, but what can we do then to find greater purpose in our work?
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. So I think that the thing about selling that's so gratifying to me, that's so purposeful, is that I believe that almost anything, almost any product or service can be a tool that you offer to the other person for them to be the very best version of themselves in that area of their life. I have a house example that is a great one for this. I had a home, this was a couple homes ago, that I decided to renovate the kitchen, and I'd never done a big home renovation project before. And part of why I was renovating the kitchen is because crazily, we thought we were going to be there a long time and not move, which of course we did, and it made selling the house easier. But we thought this kitchen we're going to have for a long time. We really spent a lot of money on it. And But the other reason I went ahead and did the kitchen is because my mother was coming to live with us, and my mother had been disabled by a stroke and she couldn't walk anymore. So she's in a wheelchair. So having a wider berth and taking out the center kitchen island was a priority for me because I wanted her to feel comfortable living in the home. Okay.
Mhm.
Fast forward to the architect coming. I had a budget in mind. The architect comes, he asks me so many amazing questions about how I want to live in that kitchen. And he asked about my mother and whether she would be cooking. He just assumed there would be a way to find for her to do that, right? It was really beautiful. So he's asking about what will she like to do in the kitchen? And is it important to me that she be able to reach certain things? And are we also going to work at this bar? And of course, what do you think happened? I spent a lot more money on the kitchen than I was going to because he basically re-engineered my vision. But even though I knew that was happening, I was happy all the while because he really was sincere. He took such genuine interest in saying, I hear you. I know you have a budget. Let's do the best we can with that budget you've given me. And so what he did is he gave me a plan based on what I said was important in the budget I gave. And then he gave a budget that was 25% more. And I went with somewhere between the two, right? But he respected and honored what I first said was a goal, but then he listened to what else was important. And he saw the kitchen not just as a place to cook food, but as the gathering place, as a way that my mother could contribute to the household, as a place where my kids would do homework, as the center. I mean, I had this gigantic bar. We joked that we could land a plane on it, but we had everything you could possibly want for that space in that kitchen. And the kitchen was the tool for me to be the kind of mother, business owner, daughter, neighbor, volunteer, and wife that I wanted to be because he sold me that.
Wow. Wow. And you did talk about that, which I love, the tool that if we can see that we're helping others, that the work we do, that whether it's our product or our service, is going to be that tool to change somebody's life, especially in a home where they live every single day, might that uplift us to help us find greater purpose in our work than just shoot, I need a commission because I need to get paid. I mean, that's life changing. And moving to mindset a little bit, because sales sales will kick your butt. If you don't have some tough skin, you won't last very long. And mindset, the things that we tell ourselves, we deal with rejection a lot. We deal with even sometimes our friends and family, going and buying and selling with someone else, and wow, that can beat you up. So from your experience, I mean, what role do you believe that mindset plays in becoming a successful sales leader?
I think it's such a huge part of the equation, Allie, because first of all, a lot of people are a little bit asleep at the wheel as to what their mindset is, because I've heard these astounding numbers between 50,000 and 70,000 thoughts a day that people have, right? So you have these thoughts running through your head. Many are repeat, automatic, habitual things like I'm going to let the dog out, or I hope so and so remembered this or that, right? But some are negative. Some are about what you think about yourself, or what you ruminate about your profession, or what you say to make others wrong, what you say in your own head about other people. And so that all contributes and affects us in how we perform. I think that years ago, I heard someone say this word that was very helpful to me in assessing my own mindset. They said, start to notice. The word notice what you are telling yourself. And that word notice was so meaningful to me because it's a word that doesn't have any judgment. Because if you notice that you have a lot of unhelpful perspectives about selling, or you have a lot of negativity about other people, or you rehearse things that make you fearful, or whatever your challenge might be, if you start to notice that, you might next feel ashamed that you have caught yourself feeling that way. And that is not motivating, right? Like shame is very unhelpful. So noticing feels very non-judgmental to me, but some of what I cover in the book and what I'd like to cover in my courses in coaching with people is for them to slow down. And if they feel themselves procrastinating, so let's go back to your earlier question about the revenue generating activities. If you know that you are supposed to make some follow-up calls because you met some people at a networking event and they said, let's have coffee together, but now you feel nervous to ask them and you find yourself procrastinating, instead of pushing that back and acting like that problem's going to go away, when you want to engage and notice, hey, I'm procrastinating, right? Call it what it is, as opposed to busying ourselves and pushing that issue to the back of our minds. We want to bring it forward and say, what's happening here? Notice that something's happening, and then start to practice reframing how, number one, you could look at it differently. And number two, we're all interpreters, and there's probably a way that you're interpreting the situation that is optional and could be framed a different way. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. They're reframing. I'm thinking of all the things I'm always procrastinating, the things that seem so hard. And I'm like, how could I reframe those? Just kind of on a random note, do you practice affirmations at all? Is that something that you believe help us? Or, I mean, I don't know, you tell me, is that something you do in your business and with
I
other
really
leaders?
do, Allie. I really do. And I didn't always. I'm married to a social science researcher. And so for many years, I would have put that like sort of in this woo-woo category that was somehow ethereal and not scientific. And that's also not true, because there's a lot of research about what we tell ourselves. there's all kinds of things about personality traits and a person's self-concept and research on self-esteem and things like that. I do have affirmations. I am constantly collecting ones that I feel attracted to, that look interesting to me, that I read over. And then the other thing I do that might be interesting and helpful for your listeners, I know that people can't see this, but I'm going to show you behind the scenes. I'll show you my jar. I actually have a tactic that I use that is, to me, a supplement to affirmations, because affirmations can be forgotten. Like you see them on the page and you practice trying to embed them in your mind, but then you can get busy in your day and forget. And so I like to have tangible evidence of real value.
Wow.
Okay, and that's what I call tangible evidence. So I have bought these beautiful marbles, and I bought them from a marble store online. They're not like the Chinese checkers, inexpensive marbles. They're these beautiful hand blown, like kind of work of art in between, just each one of them individually. And every month I start over again. And as I get a referral, or someone tells me that something was helpful to them, or I get a positive review, or someone pats me on the back for something, I actually drop a marble in my jar.
Wow.
And I look at this on my desk. It's literally on the windowsill by my desk every month. And I try to fill it up and use up all the marbles by the end of the month. And then I start over at the beginning of a new month and I start tracking again. But when I am engaging in unhelpful self-talk, or I catch myself and I notice something I might be thinking that is an interpretation and not true and not helpful, and it doesn't advance my cause with selling, I have something tangible to look over and I say, well, all those people thought that what I provided was very valuable because I put that in there because they told me so.
Ah, that's phenomenal,
Isn't that
especially.
helpful?
Absolutely, especially because I think you'd agree that so often we remember, we could have had nine people tell us great job, but one person rejected us and whatever, but we're going to remember that one person, right? And so when you have something tangible that you can look at and go, wait a minute, I'm not telling the truth to myself here. I'm not a terrible
Right.
salesperson. I'm not a failure. Look, I am winning. And now you can see it, because we forget. If we don't
We
write
do
them
forget
down.
because we're fickle and we're busy and we might be sleepy or grumpy or whatever. And so I and my scientifically minded husband, we laugh about this because he would call that real data.
Wow.
Right. He would say those marbles are evidence of real data because you put them in because this actual action happened. And so we would say, where's the proof? Where's the proof of this thing that you're thinking that's unhelpful? I've got a whole jar of proof over here that says the opposite is true. And it's a counterbalance to that powerful inner voice, which we might have trained ourselves to listen to because we didn't notice how unhelpful it was in keeping us from doing the things that actually, ultimately, we do want to be doing.
Wow. Well, and the data scientist is going to help me transition into my next question because, I'm a data nerd. I like the analytics. I'm analytical. And you talk. So this concept in the way it really resonated with me personally, and that's that people they don't necessarily buy products or services just because we're the smartest person and we can shoot out all the data, which again I took personal because I'm just that kind of person. I like to research everything. I love data and facts. And I remember early on in my career thinking that that's what would sell a home. Like, well, look, it's the cheapest per square foot. It makes sense with your finances. And like, yeah, right. I mean, data is one thing. Emotion is what will make you act, And so, when I think of if people don't then buy from the smartest salespeople, why do they choose one salesperson over another?
That's a great question. I can think of two answers for that. One is there's quite a bit of data that shows that people I've seen data around this in purchasing departments, for example, inside companies. They will often call on the most recent person whose names they can remember because they stayed top of mind. So there's the recency effect. And that makes a real case for the importance of thinking all the time, what is added value, right? I think you saw in the book, I have a definition, and the definition of sales that I love is from the Integrity Selling System. And it says that selling is identifying and fulfilling additional value above the price someone pays you, for the thing. So it's raising this concept of this idea of what is additional value. So if you are generous in the content you share, if you care about things that are important to them because they're important to you, you remember someone's birthday, you notice on Facebook that someone's dog died, right? Whatever is the thing that is a good human sort of thing to do. If you do that, you stay top of mind. So number one, people is buy from people that can remember. Hopefully you'll be a good person and they'll remember you for the right reasons. I think then the other reason, there's probably many, but the other reason that comes to my mind is that people like people who like them.
Absolutely. We know that. We hear it over and over and over again, that people want to work with those that they know, like, and trust. And so for us analyticals, that did take a minute to kind of put the data on the back. It's important. It absolutely is. But we don't have to know everything. So especially for my new real estate agents listening, a lot of times they're like, well, I don't know everything. I'm afraid to get out there. Doesn't matter. So often, like, get out there, make relationships. People want to work with people they like, so.
Yeah, I agree. And Ellie, if I could even add this, like, I think there's something very interesting in particular in your industry that is probably a pro and a con around this. And I'm not a real estate agent, but I've bought and sold a lot of houses for myself and helped my parents a couple times and things like that. And so I feel like I've been in the middle of quite a few transactions with several different realtors. And one of the things that is so good about your industry, if you're the seller, if you're the agent, is that it's hard to break up with an agent once you're in the middle of the engagement, right? Like, whether a person technically can, I'm speaking as the customer, I'm telling you, it feels hard. It feels like it's a really big deal to disengage once you are working with someone, even if you don't have a contract yet. So that's great, right? I mean, that's really good for you because there's a stickiness element that's not as true for some people who sell other things. But the flip side is, if you don't have a great relationship with that person, you feel stuck and you will never get a referral from them.
Oh,
and referrals drive everything in your business. right?
Absolutely. Yeah, they are the lifeblood. And for sure, we want to make sure that's why we're always, at least this podcast is about content, right? I'm always talking about content
Mhm.
because it's a leverage that really just helps you stay top of mind. But more than anything, when you deliver something in value, you exchange trust. People trust you. They feel like they know you. They watch your videos all the time. My clients are like, oh, I saw your video on this. They feel like they know me because, yeah, they're watching me and therefore they like me and then they want to do business with me. So
Yes.
that was an aha for me in my sales experience for
Yes.
sure.
And I think the other things that are just the rules you learn on the playground, people just forget that in professional situations. So I was sharing about the dog dying or someone's birthday or this or that, but over the years, as I've been selling for more and more and more years, it's more and more challenging to remember all of the dates and people and preferences that people have. But every time I do, and I remember to send a card, or I remember to reach out and just say, hey, I'm thinking about you, I remember that this time last year this was going on. Like, that's where a little bit of technology so that you can keep up with important dates and track stuff, like that's where that will really help you behind the scenes. Because what would a friend do?
Right.
Right? A friend would also just be a good human about some of the personal side of things too. And I think more and more, because of social media, because of the internet, I think there's more merging of that professional and personal together. And people have higher expectations about what you should know about them because of what information is publicly available.
Oh wow. And it really leads into what we're talking about today, which is being more human with the sales process. We are selling to humans, and therefore the more human like we can be, the higher or the deeper connections that we're going to make. And this kind of takes me into sort of my next question a little bit, and it's that from your research and your years in coaching salespeople, what have you learned that you could share with us today about why and how people make their buying decisions?
Mhm. Yes, yes. I think the thing that one of the biggest shifts I've made that has surprised me is that money is not as much the obstacle as I first thought. Um, I don't know what the real estate data say about that, so I'd be interested in what you would add to that. But when I was first trained to sell software and consulting services years ago as an employee, I was taught to ask, what is your budget? And I understand if you're going to search the MLS, you need to know a range. I do understand that. But I also feel like after coaching hundreds and hundreds of different clients over 25 years under all different circumstances, we can all think of many examples where a person went above what they originally told you because they had perceived value.
Hmm.
And so the more important question, I think you have a preliminary conversation about money, but the overarching most important thing about why people buy, I think, is because they believe that it's fulfilling those goals. It's getting them to that future state of however they envision themselves with whatever it is. I mean, I gave an example in the book where I talk about this company I worked with that manufactures fuel injection parts for cars. And I'm not a car person, and I had to learn all about car stuff to work with them because I wasn't very experienced with car part manufacturing. But you've just never seen people get so lit up and excited about something because they're all car guys. And the fact that when you put this new kind of fuel injection system in your engine and it makes your car run better, then that is the tool, back to our earlier point, that's the tool that then enables them to spend their time with their community, racing cars on the weekend, in being their very best self in leisure. That's how they see themselves. And so this little thing is literally a little thing that fits inside a bigger thing, which then fulfills a bigger purpose. That's their goal, right? That gives them value. That gives them community. That gives them things. So people buy when they're driven by that emotional side of it. It doesn't mean there's no logical aspect or that budget doesn't matter, but I think how subjective it is about what someone else values has really surprised me over the years. What do you think of that?
Oh, absolutely. And I love that because I was literally, and I shared this a couple shows ago, that I was at a lunch with a past client. I thought I understood what value meant to him. And he sat down and he's like, the reason I work with you isn't necessarily because you're the best agent for an investor. It's because I always know you're going to create this win-win relationship. You're going to represent me really well to the other side of the transaction, and it's going to be a win-win. And I had no idea that that's what he valued. So absolutely. And you do kind of talk a little bit, and I've talked to the audience about this too. What you were saying is this identity transformation, right? We're
Mhm.
not really
Mhm.
selling four walls or two-car garage. We're selling who that person dreams of becoming, a homeowner, the American dream, whatever that is. So absolutely, you totally hit that there on the head. And I guess, if I'm, because real estate agents, probably the biggest challenge that I see in the industry, with took me a couple of years, and I see a lot of my colleagues deal with this, is finding consistency in
Mhm.
their business, right? Like, you're only as good as your next deal. Sometimes you don't even know when that next deal is going to come. And so if I'm a real estate agent who, maybe isn't hitting my sales goals,
Mhm.
and what would you recommend that I improve, or maybe change, so that I increase the number of sales opportunities that I create for myself?
It's great. Well, I think that anyone who is self-employed and who is responsible for managing their whole day faces this challenge, which is, so I think it's not unique to real estate. And I appreciate your question, because it has to do with just how do I run my day and how am I using that time? So I use this term revenue generating activity to mean what are the things that I do where I initiate or follow up on something that was previously someone with whom I previously initiated. What kind of time am I spending doing that on a regular basis? And I really like to encourage people to think about a marathon and not a sprint. So I have many people, I'll have Allie, like, in group coaching, and they'll say, I'm willing to make 3 outreaches a day. But if you do 3 outreaches a day for months and years, that's a lot of outreaches, right? So a 13 is better than 3 and 23 is better than 13, but 3 a day is much better than 15 once a week,
Hmm.
right? Because what's going to happen is you're going to see someone's out of office email and you're going to see that they're not back till Thursday. So you need to follow up Thursday, right? Like, you need the consistency so that every day you're doing your outreach. And so I think that you can include past and existing clients in that as well. Again, this idea of staying top of mind. That's why content's so valuable, because you're giving them additional content and continuing to stay in touch. I have been very surprised at how many moves I've done in my own life.
Mhm.
And I would not have thought that I would have bought and sold as many houses in my years as I have. And so even though someone tells you this is their forever home, I wouldn't write them off and assume that that deal is done. Not just what referrals can you generate from that relationship, but that very family, you don't know what kind of opportunity is going to come to them. And so that recency effect, right? Staying top of mind is very powerful. So if someone is really struggling, the first place that I encourage them to look is actually to track for a week or two and write down what they do with their day.
Ah.
So you could literally keep a time journal, and you can have a few buckets. Like, I'll usually have people say internal meetings. This might be like all hands on deck customer things, or paperwork, contract processes. There's a lot of back office stuff that you all have to do. I know that. So you have these different categories of how the time could be spent, and then just look as a percentage of a day and of a week, and look at how much is going toward increasing the number of relationships with those revenue generating activities. And that will really tell you something. Most people are surprised by what a small percent they actually spend on that.
Mhm. Yeah, wow, in the 8 years that I've been a real estate agent, absolutely. I stay in business not because I'm the best or because I'm the most likable. It's because I just, and this is going to sound silly, but I mean, we were on a call with my broker this morning. He has a Mamba mindset call where he talks about Kobe Bryant's Mamba mindset. And Kobe talked about this idea where he says, he never got tired of doing the mundane things. And yes, we think, wow, we get into the business, I'm going to make so much money, or I'm going to get to work for myself, and those things are possible, but boy, you had better like being consistent, because
Mhm,
that's the only way,
mhm.
from my experiences, you're going to see your business show up, consistently. And
Well,
so, oh,
and
go
I
ahead.
think you, Ali, with part of being a good human, and this is something I'm continually working on even after all of these years, because I have a lot of skill in doing that sales outreach now. So think of my calls a lot that way, but I'm reminded of a client. He made one of his goal setting exercises that he did with me. He made that be to have a certain number of outreach calls in a week that were to existing clients that were what he called just because calls.
Oh.
And I was so touched that this guy was a partner in his firm. And I was very touched that he was thinking about how he wanted to be known as a person who was just a good person, just a good human, and who genuinely cared. And so he set a goal for himself, and it was really modest. I mean, it was like 2 calls a week. It wasn't like it was 20, but he said, I want to prioritize and put on my calendar that I rotate through my clients and I remember things they've told me, so I would check back. So he gave the example that at his age, a lot of current clients of his also had kids graduating high school or college. And so he wanted to remember what grades people were in and just ask how things were going. And his goal was, he said, it can be a 10-minute call, but what if you called just to say hi? you know
Hmm.
and I did that last week with a client, and I could tell that I could tell she was delighted. And I'm not saying that to pat myself on the back. It was such a sobering reminder to me that it's always easier to serve the people who are with us and actually get more business and get referrals from there than it is to go find new ones. And so we want to balance doing both. And I take that very experienced partner and his own self-coaching, to heart for myself, and remember that that's a good practice also.
Oh, you know, um, just being more human, just remembering that, again, coming back to that concept that, we're working with humans, and a just because call, like, you're not calling to sell me anything. You just remembered me. And I think in the world we live in today, people are dying to be seen. Like, they are craving to be acknowledged and remembered. And so, for sure, I agree with you that's how we can deepen relationships and sell more humanly. And so, as I guess my final question, would just, as you think about, there's so many things that you could wrap up, and you've got just decades of advice you could give us, and we could spend hours talking. What's maybe one thing, as you wrap up, coming back into this, that you would advise to, whether I'm a new real estate agent, someone who's been in the business a long time, you know, that you would just kind of remind us all to do? What's one thing that we could do to have more empathy, to connect with our prospects on a deeper, more human level?
Mhm. So one of the things that helps me be successful in how I run my day, back to that idea of a time journal, doing my activities, increasing my numbers. One of the things that really helps me, Ali, is to remember that as a human, okay, I have empathy toward other people, and I have empathy toward myself because I'm imperfect. And one of the ways that we are imperfect is that we are imperfect interpreters.
Hmm.
And our prospects are imperfect interpreters. So what happens is you send an email over with the best of intentions and it's misread. right? This has all happened to us. Thank God for emojis in texting, because we kind of made fun of it when it first came out, but it's so helpful to helping ascribe intent to something, because you can pick the expression that you are hoping someone has when they read it. But we all are always interpreting what is around us. And as soon as we notice, goes back to that word notice, as soon as we notice that we might be wrong, then we can have all this charity and all this grace, both for ourselves and for others, but also it gives us all this power in a good way. And I talk about selling power in some of my training, and I mean power for good, right? Power to help people, power to feel encouraged to reach out, power to not give up, because we realize that we are interpreting someone's response or lack of response through a filter, which is a filter that has holes in it, right? It's not perfect. We can't help it. It's part of the human condition that we bring our whole self to a situation, and that whole self has its set of experiences, and it's not going to be perfect. It's going to be subject to interpretation. As soon as we realize that we do that and that others do that, that really fuels me to not give up so soon in my own outreach, to be braver in going back and saying, did that come across the way that I meant it to? Here's what I meant to say, or to even in some cases to ask forgiveness for something, right? Because we realize that we hold a lot of power in how we can manage ourselves and do our work by realizing that we're doing our very best to interpret what's going on around us, but it's not going to be 100% accurate. It's just the human condition, and we are all doing our best.
I'm so glad you said that. It's taken me a long time to not take it personal when somebody would buy or sell with somebody else. And I had poured into, this person's life. I had either supported their business or, whatever, just all those things to just be more human. And when I would see them go and sell or buy with someone else, it was so difficult not to take that personal. And over the years, it still hurts a little bit, but I'm able to sort of walk away a little bit easier now and not take it so personal, and realize that it has nothing to do with me, not to take the intent that this person was trying to be malicious or they were trying to hurt me, unfriending them, whatever it was, that really just saying, it had nothing to do with me. At that point in their life, they were in connection with this other person for some reason, and it truly had nothing to do with me being a really great agent or me being a really bad agent. It just wasn't about me. And so that filter, removing the filter of, oh my gosh, has really helped me not probably ruin more relationships that I might have.
Right. And I think the pandemic was really useful. It was so terrible in lots of ways, but it was useful in that growing empathy for everyone. First of all, through Zoom, you see into people's homes, everyone had more blending of personal and professional when they were working, a lot of people were working from home in a new way. But I think too, building on that empathy, you realize that you just don't have the whole story. In the book, I tell an example of how I really thought I had this slam dunk opportunity to do sales training inside this company. And then mysteriously, the buyer didn't get back to me. And I really thought I would hear back with him, within 24 hours, because we'd had a series of calls and everything was going so well. And I chased and chased and chased, and had to force myself to keep following up because I was so nervous. And come to find out he was ill.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't, how could I have known that? I didn't know. So if I had decided to interpret his lack of response and given that a different kind of power than I did, that would have affected how I acted, which probably would have affected his later behavior. But because I was optimistic and I was persistent, but I gave him some space, but I kept indicating my interest, he came back, apologized, and got right back on the horse, with me when he returned to work and said, crazily, I was ill. And thank goodness I didn't make it weird by giving up and dropping off the face of the earth because I decided I was rejected. I wasn't rejected. He just wasn't getting back to me.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. I mean, for reminding us, bringing us back to number one, sort of reconnecting with our purpose about why we do what we do, and
Mhm.
how we really work as guides in the life of others, right? And helping them achieve those goals, those big goals that they have for themselves in their life, and for kind of helping us all fall back in love with sales, and seeing it as a noble profession instead of something slimy and sleazy. And so I really want you to just kind of tell the audience a little bit. I think we all need coaches. Anybody in real estate or in sales, whatever, we all need coaches if we're going to arrive at our maximum potential. And so could you just kind of, as we close today, just kind of tell us about your come and go coaching program, and if somebody's interested in kind of leveling up their sales skills, being a better sales leader, kind of what that program entails, what they could expect to take from it.
Thank you so much, Ali. Yes, I would love to. So, probably for your listeners, the two best things to know are that the least expensive, easiest way to engage is to buy my book,
Okay.
which is called How Good Humans Sell by Catherine Brown, and it's on Amazon. It's available on Kindle and paperback. Probably at the first of the year, I'll have it available on Audible as well. It's not yet, but that's a next goal for me. Then after that, the next way to get some coaching and help that's still a relatively modest commitment is this program I have called Come and Go Coaching. We meet every Wednesday afternoon, and we meet weekly as a group over Zoom. It's live, and I have a short teaching, but then I facilitate a discussion where we practice and implement the lesson that we went through. So we might be writing copy together. We might be actually dissecting other people, like people will even volunteer sometimes their own material. You don't have to do that if you don't want, but we'll dissect the way people are describing how they help others, or we'll look at sales emails together and we'll rewrite those and make those stronger, talking about the principles of how to present ourselves as a guide. And so we have these live lessons, we record them, you pay by the month. So currently I charge $179 a month, and it's just like Netflix. You just pay by the month as long as it makes sense for you, and you can stop at any time. But most people do it for several months, and it tends to get people unstuck. Sometimes they'll join because they have some new goals they want to set, or they want to just be around other people who will inspire them to get back on the horse and start doing more revenue generating activities. So I think a couple things that are very surprising to me about the group. I've been running it for a year now. And one of the things that has been very surprising to me is the benefit of people mixing with other industries. So there's all kinds of people who sell all kinds of products and services in there. And you might think, well, that's not just real estate focused, but I believe that's to people's benefit, because the creativity of hearing what other people do is very inspiring, and we can often learn from other people and their businesses. But also, these are mostly all business owners who feel responsible for their own sales. So people are scrappy, hungry, looking for new ideas, and wanting to help each other.
Oh, well, I'll make sure that I put a link to that, but I'd also invite listeners to connect with you on LinkedIn as well. You share a lot of great content on LinkedIn as well that's super helpful, that I mean, if you're giving that away for free, I can only imagine what, we get inside your coaching program. So I'll make sure that I include that, and absolutely all of us, I invite those listening to connect with you, to read your book. I enjoyed it. And so I just want to say, Catherine, author, How Good Humans Sell, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. I love real estate. I think what you sell is literally life-giving, and it's my absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.